We know that reading for all children begins with phonemic awareness. It's the most important thing we've ever learned about teaching young children to read. The phoneme, of course, is the smallest unit of speech in spoken language. The cat has 3 phonemes and boot has 3 phonemes. We're not talking about how a word is spelled, but how many phonemes are in that word. We know that children who begin reading instruction with strong phonemic awareness have greater success learning the alphabet and learning how to read. Phonemic awareness is a strong, consistent predictor of later reading achievement. Each lesson we present to a child is based on that child's ability to isolate and hear individual sounds or phonemes. Now, the big picture is our understanding of phonemic awareness basically guides us in our instruction. We know that we have to move from speech to print. Every activity I'm going to show you today invites the child to move from spoken language to print, from sound to symbol. I'm going to talk very briefly about rhyming. Rhyming is not directly related to reading, but it is an important beginning step for young children because we're basically stimulating the part of their brain that deals with sounds in spoken language. Not individual phonemes, but chunks of sound. And so my suggestion is to not spend a lot of time on rhyming. If you're a first grade teacher and you have some kids that can't rhyme, you've got bigger fish to fry. My suggestion is to teach children specific rhymes. That's the best way to teach them how to rhyme. So I'll just simply flash cards at children. Doesn't take me but 20 or 30 seconds. I go through a set of pictures, mouse, house. They call it out and repeat mouse, house. Cat, hat. Pear, bear. So what happens is on the second day when I hold up mouse, I have most of the kids calling out house. And then when I hold up the picture of cat, almost all the children right away will start calling out hat. If I hold up pear, they call out bear. In other words, it's very easy to teach them specific rhymes. And then you have an activity that they can perform by putting the rhyming pictures together. That doesn't mean they can rhyme. It doesn't even mean that they recognize rhymes. It just means that they know these sets of rhymes and they start to stimulate their brain and they start to learn how to rhyme. Those of you who have kindergarten and first grade kids who just need simply to do something with their hands, be involved with an activity, simple rhyming activities are really good for them. What I want to focus more on is beginning sound isolation. Children need to be able to look at house and say, ha. Look at zebra and say, zzz. Look at banana and say, buh. Touch the table and say, t. In other words, slicing off that beginning sound. Why? Because if a child can look at bear and say, buh, then they can look at that black abstract symbol and understand that it says buh. Doesn't mean they've learned it. Doesn't mean they're going to know it tomorrow. It just means they understand it. To appreciate the alphabetic significance of letters, children must gain conscious access to phonemes. Another way of putting this, which is my motto, is that we teach the alphabetic principle before we teach the alphabet. This is the alphabetic principle, how sounds of spoken language are represented by abstract symbols that we call letters. I teach beginning sound isolation by modeling it. Who has a monkey? Who has a table? Who has the wagon? Now I can see from my vantage point which images are on the cards in front of me. Who has horse? I'm modeling the slicing off beginning sounds. The child is putting a game piece on there and repeating horse. When a child can, on their own, isolate beginning sounds, which for a kindergarten kid doesn't take long, and for a first grader, it's absolutely easy for them. We want them to practice slicing off those beginning sounds. So the bingo cards now are something that they can use to isolate and find all of the pictures, all of the images that have the same beginning sound of sun, sun, soap. So it's really, really good practice. And the beginning sound isolation skill becomes stronger and faster. This is the skill that they're going to use, as you'll see as I progress. This is the skill they're going to need and use to learn the sounds of the alphabet. I come from an early childhood background, obviously. I believe strongly in giving children hands-on materials, giving them choice of activities. Repetition is really important for young children as they learn. And as you know, those children who are struggling in kindergarten and first grade, second grade, they were not able to get enough successful repetition for whatever reason. Hands-on learning, repetition, choice builds success. And I do also want children to gain independence. The alphabetic principle. Teach the alphabetic principle before you teach the alphabet. Let's explore this for a moment. I am working with Veronica, and she can tell me the beginning sound of anything. Veronica, what's the beginning sound of goat? And she says G. I say, right. That letter right next to the goat says G. Mr. Goat is telling us what that letter says. What is the beginning sound of sun? S, right. So Mr. Sun is telling us what that letter says. S. Now I want you to think about the beginning sound of house, and I want you to tell me what that letter says. So you can see where I'm going with this. Veronica is learning the alphabetic principle. It doesn't mean she knows the alphabet yet. Doesn't mean she's going to remember any of this tomorrow. I just want to be sure that she can look at a picture, slice off the beginning sound, and tell me what that letter says. And we can go over to the alphabet chart in the classroom, and she can tell me every single letter on that chart if she knows what the picture is. What's that letter next to the ladder? Oh, right. What's that, Mr. Klein? Oh, that's a pear. Right, so that letter says P. You get the idea. Whenever I talk about the alphabet, whenever I mention letter, I'm only ever talking about the sounds of the letters. This is a multiple choice activity. It's hands-on. It provides repetition with learning the alphabet sounds. The hammer is asking Veronica, where is the When I present this lesson, especially with young children, I'm only going to present it to a child that can isolate beginning sounds, number one. Number two, I have to be sure that this young child, who might only be 4 or 5, or even 3, that they understand the game. But they've got the skill they need, which is simply slicing off beginning sounds. So I'm going to take a turn. Veronica's going to take a turn. I'm going to take a turn. Veronica's going to take another turn. Hammer is asking us, where is the seal was asking us, where is this? So think about it for a minute. It's multiple choice. Of course, the pictures at the top give Veronica the clue of where that S is, where the G is. So it's actually pretty easy. But again, I want to be sure that she's comfortable playing the game. At some point, Veronica is quite familiar with those 5 letters, and I can turn the card over, and now there's no picture at the top, just the alphabet letters. But let's think about it again. The goose is saying, where's the G? It's still multiple choice. Mr. Goose says, where's the G? There it is. I see it. My old friend, the G, which I've seen 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 times. So it's actually quite simple. It's extremely reinforcing of the sounds of the letters. It's hands-on. And there's that really good repetition that we like. Where is the says the hat. Well, there it is. I've seen the many times already. That's where the is. So it's actually quite easy. A teacher might ask me, well, what about the W and the P over here? You didn't teach that to her yet. And I'll say, well, that's fine. I don't need to. I'm only interested right now in the I want her to recognize that H really quickly and become really good at it. Now, for those of you who have kindergarten and first and second graders who have been through the alphabet, but they're not real strong with it, this is perfect practice for them. I actually believe that most reading instruction is supervised practice. If I'm giving a child an activity that I think they can be successful with, then I'm going to see if I'm right or wrong. Through experience, of course, I'm usually right, as most teachers are who've had experience. And now we're going to observe, well, how quickly did the child do the lesson? Did they struggle? Were there parts of it they didn't understand? So I'm just observing to see how it goes. What is the child ready for next? Was he ready for this activity, or did I misjudge? The point that I really want to make about the alphabet is that it takes children hundreds of exposures for a letter to become fully automatic in memory. So we want to provide them with different kinds of activities so they can be engaged with something that's interesting to them, they like. I believe that repetition is the healing balm of education. And I believe I'm a better teacher whenever I can provide the child with more repetition that's fun, entertaining, hands-on. If it involves choice and freedom of movement, all the better. In my method, the way I've taught early childhood for many, many years, is that I introduce the alphabet in clusters, 5 letters at a time. The basic principle is that I need to be accountable to make sure that every child that I work with goes through the alphabet. If I'm just teaching the alphabet willy-nilly, I don't really know who knows what. So I want to be systematic. I want to be accountable to make sure every child knows the alphabet. So this is my first cluster. And you've seen the different games that I've already showed you, right? So there are multiple games that the child can use. Now I'm going to do the same thing with cluster 2. This is my particular cluster. But what happens is the child is already quite familiar with these games. And I've divided these games up into separate little containers so that they only have to do with those 5 letters. They're already familiar with the activity. They know how to play the game. Their beginning sound isolation is very strong. And they have begun to teach themselves how to teach themselves the alphabet. And that's why I have that chapter in my book called How Children Teach Themselves the Alphabet. This is how they do it. This is how they do it. This is also just fantastic intervention and remedial kinds of activities for children who have dropped stitches in the alphabet world. Okay, let's talk about phoneme segmentation. We want a child to be able to look at cat and say cat. Phoneme segmentation is the most important reading readiness skill of everything. I cannot emphasize enough how crucial this very important skill is for beginning readers. We need children who can look at boot and say b-oot. Ch, g-oo-s, b-ox. And I teach segmentation by playing the blending game, using cards like this. Each image only has 3 phonemes. That's why I have 3 circles there. It Doesn't matter how the word is spelled, it just has 3 phonemes. Okay, Veronica, pay attention now. I have a picture. I'm hiding it from you. You can't see it. I want you to guess what I have. Watch my mouth and listen very carefully. Right, cup. And I hand her the card. B, oo, t. Right, boot. Let's try one more. Ch, ch. Church. Now, Charles has been working with me a lot, and I need to make it more challenging for him because, as you know, if something is too easy for too long, children really won't want to play with you anymore. They're in the business of growing up, and they don't want to be treated like babies. So, Charles, I'm going to make it harder for you. Do I have your permission? And of course, he always says yes. So listen carefully. G, oo, s, b, a, x. So you see what I'm doing. I'm separating the sound further and further apart. With a very young child who's just beginning, I'm going to keep the sounds really close together. G, oat. Right, goat. So everyone gets a turn and everyone gets individualized instruction. For Veronica, maybe not Veronica, maybe Sally. Okay, Sally, I'm going to close my eyes. And you give me 3 sounds and I have to guess what it is. So now Veronica, excuse me, Sally, I'm getting my kids mixed up. Sally is hiding the picture from me and she's giving me 3 phonemes. So now she's the teacher giving me 3 phonemes and I'm guessing the word. So it can go back and forth like that. I also played the blending game with a blending game bingo. I'm going to put something in the chat box right now. Which is my order form. I'm not trying to sell you any materials. I'm trying to sell you ideas. But the other thing that I just put into the chat box is a file that you can actually see all of my games and activities visually. It's called a visual catalog. And you can click on any of the names of the games and download it. These little struggling first graders in California really needed to do more phoneme segmentation. So this is just a simple game where they take an object and they segment it while they're moving their finger into the 3 circles. Now, why do we teach blend? Why do we do the blending game? Well, young children will use blending when they begin to decode or sound out the first words. K, a, t. So they have to blend those sounds together to come up with the word. But the more important thing about the blending game is that it teaches children how to segment. The entire time that I'm giving them 3 sounds for them to blend, they are hearing me segment and I'm teaching their brain how to segment. This is the most efficient way of teaching children how to segment without trying to get them to segment, if you know the difference, if you see what I'm saying. Let's explore phoneme segmentation and why it's important. For those of you who have children who are already decoding, starting to read, but their letter knowledge is not that great, I have a couple more alphabet games that you can use for them. The ending sounds and letters. They have to segment dog, d, a, g, d, a, g. Well, there's the g. Cat, k, at, t. There's the t. Or doing it with a middle sound. F, ox, f, ah. Oh, there it is. There's the ah. This is a really good way to get them to review their letter sounds and also there are 5 short vowel sounds, which are most problematic of all the letter sounds because they sound so much alike. So these activities, these 3 activities I just showed you, require segmentation. But every time they find the middle sound in this particular game, they're giving themselves the perfect sound of those vowels. It's not a reading activity. It's a phoneme segmentation activity and a letter recognition activity. They're not really reading letters, they're recognizing them. Let's take another step. Just like beginning sound isolation was the open door to the alphabet, because if a child can look at goat and say g, then the child can start to teach herself that that symbol says g. In that same way, phoneme segmentation is the open door to decoding and to words. If a child can look at bus and say b, s, then I can show that child how to put those sounds from bus on those symbols and read them. Now, it's not really decoding, is it? But it looks like decoding. The brain thinks it's decoding, and it's my way of introducing a child to decoding. Veronica, let's take the pictures and the letters out of this little pocket. This is called word pockets, and I'm going to show you how to play this game. What are the sounds of pig? And she says, p-i-g. Now, I want you to give me the sounds of pig again, and I'm going to move the letters. Ready? P-i-g. Okay, now it's your turn. Say the sounds of pig, oops, and move the letters. Ready? Go. P-i-g. The segmentation of the word pig is what's driving the engine of this activity, number 1. Number 2, she's not really reading the letters, is she? She's recognizing them. It's multiple choice. Now you can imagine for a first grader or a second grader who's really struggling with decoding it because they don't know their alphabet sounds that well, this is going to really reinforce how our spoken language maps with print, number 1. Number 2, the sounds of those alphabet letters. Building words or encoding words is the most powerful way to prepare a child for decoding words. But in order to encode or spell words, you have to be able to segment. And that's why phoneme segmentation is so crucial for these young kids. If I see a child who can build a word with movable letters like this, it tells me that the child is not confused about what's going on. It doesn't mean that they can decode really well. It doesn't mean that they know their alphabet very well. But it means that they're connected with how our spoken language maps with our print. And it's such a basic step. But when I work with struggling first graders, for example, sometimes they just know they're supposed to know stuff, but they don't know it. And they're a little confused. This is the alphabetic principle at the word level. And we need to bring children back to these very basic activities so that they can then accelerate and move more quickly to things. I tend to share a lot of my word pocket photos in my presentations because I love this activity. It is so important for young children to have word building activities. This is writing words without a pencil, isn't it? Now, when you don't have to write the words with a pencil, you can do a lot more, can't you? So these kids are building a lot of words. This is just a little 4-year-old. So sweet. Spelling is reading instruction at the word level. So these word pockets, you can think of them as spelling, although we don't use letter names. It's encoding, but the same principle applies. It is reading instruction at the word level. So Veronica, give me the sounds of bus, b, Okay. Now I'm going to move my finger when you tell me the sounds. Ready, go. S. Bus. Now take the sounds of sun and put them on the word. Ready? Sun. Again, this is not really decoding, and yet it is decoding. The brain doesn't know any difference. We're teaching Veronica the sort of the mechanics of what decoding is, and she's using her phoneme segmentation to figure it out. Run. N. N. No. N. No. There it is. I'll put the game piece right there. Now, that's how a really beginning decoder would do it. Some of you are teaching kindergarten and first and second grade kids. They're already decoding. They just need to have more practice. But by having the picture there to prompt them correctly what the sounds are, they can have better practice. They can get a better rhythm of how to decode. When it's my turn to introduce an activity, I always move from sound to symbol, from speech to print. Now, of course, we obviously need to have children decoding words that don't have any picture prompts. But I want, because I come from an early childhood background, I want to prepare children to be really successful when they get here, because each one of these words is like a test. And it's a test that has 3 little tests inside. In other words, they really have to know their alphabet sounds quite well in order to be successful with decoding. I organize all of my 3-letter work in one category. This is a classroom in South Africa where I went with my sister. We set up a program there. And on this shelf over here where the red circle is, the red oval, that little box contains all the different 3-letter word activities. So if a child can segment, and if he's familiar with his alphabet sounds, he can start doing almost any of those activities. We have to remember that reading problems primarily occur at the word level. So if we're helping a struggling reader, we have to be helping them at the word level. And if they're not reading words and decoding correctly or very well, because they don't know their alphabet that well. And often it's because their phoneme segmentation, their phonemic awareness is not strong enough. Now we go from 3 letters to 4 letters. And every 4-letter word obviously has 3 sounds, 3 phonemes. So we're going to play the blending game with 4 sounds to start helping children work with 4 sounds, which is actually harder. Because whenever you have a four sounds, 4 letters, 2 of those sounds are stuck together and we have to pull them apart. S, w, e, m. T, e, n. O, a, m, p. Who has k, o, ow, d? I don't believe in teaching blends. I help children pull apart those blends. So stop. We have to be able to pull apart the s from the t in order to figure out which is the correct answer. So it's really sort of a phonemic segmentation activity more than it is, teaching them specific blends. I don't think we should be teaching them specific blends. I think they will learn those specific blends as they learn to read. O, A, G. Now, it's very common when I'm working with a child with 4 letters, 4 sounds, that they don't do it correctly, because the phoneme segmentation is actually the hard part. These are very common mistakes you'll find. And that's okay. That's okay. They're going to explore, you're going to help them, and they'll get to where they need to go. Encoding words in the classroom is extremely important. In my book, obviously, I'm showing specific games that I've been using for many, many years. And there are instructions in the book. You can download the PDF if you want. You can also buy materials from me if you're a classroom teacher and are done with making materials. Lost my train of thought. Oh, well, it'll come back to me. It'll come back to me. Sorry. How embarrassing. All right. I can edit that out of the tape. Okay. I really like to also include 5- and 6-letter words. It's almost just sort of more of a challenging puzzle, so to speak. But by this point, children know their alphabet sounds quite well. They may not be able to segment 5 or 6 sounds, but they can figure stuff out. And my whole, I just feel children teach themselves how to read. And we're helping them to do that by giving them activities that allow them to work with sounds and symbols. We obviously have to prepare them for connected text, like short phrases and sentences and decodable text. So we do have to spend some time teaching them some of the basic high frequency words so that they can find those words and read those words in short phrases like this. Sentences like this. This is one of my most popular games because children have big, long discussions and and disagreements about yes, no, maybe so. Can a cat get wet? No, says Thomas. My mom says cats hate water. Yes, says Veronica, who saw her cat fall into the toilet once. Maybe so, says Charles, who is not committed either way. They can have discussions about it, and then they want to repeat it again and again. So any game or activity that leads to repetition, I'm all for it. I have used the Mac and Tap series, the primary phonics series, for almost 40 years. They're a little bit harder in terms of the very first beginning type of books, but I really like them because they're not too silly. And children like to read them again and again and again. So I always recommend these. And when I'm working with parents, I'm coaching them and giving them materials to work at home. At some point, the child's absolutely ready for decodable readers, and this is the set that I asked them to buy. Silent E. I think that is a really key thing to do next. At least in my sequence, that's how I do it. A great way to introduce any new orthographic feature is with movable letters, with the word pockets, with the movable alphabet if you're a Montessori teacher. One time a child built a word, I'll just think as an example, maybe the word tap. And they think they're building the word tape. And so now they have the silent E in their hand saying, Mr. Klein, what is this for? Ah, here's the teaching moment. Well, you know, Veronica, that says tap. We're going to make it say tape. Watch. So I can give some instruction. It's not rocket science, but it's interesting and fun, and it's a new challenge. And so now we're giving them some basic reading activities that they can start figuring out these new words. Training their eye, training their subconscious minds to start picking up these new patterns. These materials are used to a great extent in public school, first and second grade classrooms, where the teacher just simply needs to give the children more repetition and just practice. Not just books, but actually just practicing with words. I know what I was going to tell you. I remember now. You're going to have other games that you like to use. So the games in my book are the ones I've been using for years, but you're welcome to use whatever game you want. The principles of instruction are the same no matter what game you're using. Going from speech to print, giving children hands-on activity, organizing the work so that you're progressing through things that are a little bit simple and then get harder and harder, introducing new concepts, new orthographic features in an intelligent way so the child already understands what's going on. Because the child can segment fish, they can teach themselves how to read fish. And then when they turn the card over and they just have the word and no picture, you know, they're going to make some mistakes. They're going to get it wrong some of the time. They turn it back over and go, oh, it's fish. Because in the beginning, especially with young 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds, they'll go, and then they turn it over, oh, it's fish. That's fine. They can be wrong sometimes. We don't have to protect them. But bit by bit, they'll come back to that same word and they'll get it right. I have a set of high-frequency noun cards. Now, high-frequency nouns are not the most frequent words in the English language. They're just the most frequent nouns. And I chose the ones that I could have a picture of because the picture prompts the child to figure out stuff. So I'm helping children teach themselves how to teach themselves new things without me thinking that I have to teach them every single phonetic rule, spelling rule, phonics rule. Because I think at our subconscious level, we learn these things and we start to apply those things. So that's sort of an overview of how I work with young children ages 3 to 7. And hopefully some of you who are teaching struggling readers, beginning readers of any kind, any age, you've picked up some ideas and some concepts, some game activities that you think you'd like to use. I'm going to put on a little video of the games and activities with children, and I'm just going to be in the background, and you're welcome to watch the pictures go by. And if you want to say something, just unmute and call me out from my slumber, and I'll wake up and engage again. Thank you so much for joining me today.